Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We are going to be spending the next hour looking at foundational writing strategies to support early writers. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathering virtually today from many different traditional Indigenous territories across BC, and we thank our hosts for this land that we live, work, and play on. So my name is Lisa, and I am co-presenting today with my colleague, Jen. And you can, if you haven't visited our website yet, you can check it out at poppy.ca. We have closed captioning available, so you can have live captions if you need them or want to use them. And revisiting our objectives for the next hour, looking at that foundational writing skills and strategies and routines to help maximize our students' growth as literacy learners. And we will be doing that in 3 different ways. So we've only got an hour. Our time is short. We will share short little bits of theory throughout the hour, but not a lot. So we just want you to know we've used the research on best practice and current literacy experts from around the world to help inform the why we're doing what we're doing to support our young writers. But we want to give you a lot of time to practice. So we will be doing modeling and demonstrations of some of these skills and strategies and routines to show you how it can look in a primary classroom. And then we'll also be giving you opportunities to engage, reflect, chat, and share. So putting you at the center of this workshop. And we are going to start out with a short piece of writing and having you write a 6-word story about the power of writing. So we'll ask you to come up with your 6-word story and then type it into the chat pod and share it with everyone. So we'll have a whole bunch. We'll have 125 6-word stories in a minute or so. So we want to give you a few examples to inspire you and invite you to consider that this is something you might try with your students too in a variety of topics or themes or subjects. So inspired ideas make stories come alive. Reading and writing flourish together harmoniously. Imagination and creativity captured to share. So I'm going to get a timer going and no pressure, but we'll give you about 45 seconds to come up with your 6-word story about the power of writing, and then type it into the chat bot. And then you can also scroll through and see what other people's 6-word stories are, get some inspiration and some other ideas. Oh, these are fantastic. Thank you so much. We'll leave those
Amazing
there so you'll
stories.
be able to scroll through them through this session. And yeah, so think about how you might use this with your students, especially reluctant writers or shy students who might be less willing to write a whole bunch or share orally. It's a nice habit or routine to work into your classroom. All right. So we are going to get going.
Yeah, so what a fun start to the workshop. That was great. Thank you everyone for your creative ideas. So in our classrooms, in our primary classrooms, we have so many different opportunities throughout the day to provide writing demonstrations and discussions with our students in so many different ways. So today we're really going to be focusing in on those explicit examples and really how to connect reading and writing through the activities that we do with our students every day. So what I'd like you to do is take a look at this writing sample and think about the student. What does this student already know about writing? I'll give you a couple moments to take a look. And what I'm going to have you do when you have some ideas about what the student already knows about writing, such as letter sound connections, punctuation, things like that, then I'm going to have you put it into the chat box. But I'm not going to have you press enter until the timer is finished. So you have a couple moments, take a look at the writing. And don't press enter until the timer is finished. Okay, Lisa, you can start the timer. Okay, go ahead. Excellent. Thank you so much for engaging in that. So as we're going forward, you'll notice that there are so many different aspects that the student already knows about writing in this sample. that we could build on, that we could notice, that we could nurture, that we could be a guide on the side that really helps move the student forward. So as I continue on, you can go back and take a look at what your colleagues mentioned about what the student already knows, and see if there was anything surprising or anything that you didn't think of. Okay, but we'll keep moving because short workshop. So I'm just briefly going to show you the developmental stages of writing. And notice when we're going through writing samples or writing activities today, where that falls in our developmental stages. But a lot of what we're going to be looking at today is the emergent and early writing, and focused in on how to encourage and have opportunities to move those students forward. Because really what we need to know about writing development for all of the stages of our students is that we need them to be writing about what matters to them. They need to care about what they're writing about. So whenever we can bring in their interests or making authentic reasons to write, that really helps our students be motivated. And then we're really, as educators, guides on the side that really provide that specific feedback, that is explicit instruction that helps move those students forward. Because as we know in our primary classrooms, we have many different abilities, and writing is one of those things, one of those areas that is naturally differentiated for our students, that they can engage in many different areas for their abilities. So this is our comprehensive literacy framework that we refer a lot to in Populand, because it really shows the relationship between reading and writing and word work and oral language, and how so many of the activities that we do on a daily basis with our students are involving all of those areas of interconnected language and literacy. So today we're going to be really focused on the writing aspect of it. Cute little moving graphic, but really notice how so much of what we do is interconnected, and how our students will develop reading skills and word work skills and oral language through our use of writing opportunities in the classroom. And we really also want to focus on our scaffolded support. So how we are working with students in order to provide them the modeled instruction that they need, especially when we're teaching them new skills, but also in between they're learning new skills through modeling, all the way to working independently and practicing those skills independently. There are so many different ways that we can have our students express themselves through writing, so many different ways that we can bring writing into all different areas of the curriculum. So just take a quick look at these and notice if there's anything that you haven't done with your students that would engage them further with writing in the future.
Thanks, Jen. I'm noticing that early on when I was moving my toolbar that I must have accidentally hit annotate, and I've got those little yellow scribbles on this screen, and they're going to drive me a bit bonkers, but that's okay. I'm going to pretend I don't see them. It's like an opportunity to be very zen. Absolutely. So one of the things we wanted to highlight is in supporting students' growth as writers is getting to know their attitudes and their interests and their preferences for writing. And this can inform how we teach and what supports we offer, as well as the variety and the differentiation possibilities that we have in our classroom when we think about having a writing classroom or creating a classroom of writers. So this is a little excerpt from our writing interest survey that we have created, and it's on our website in the writing section. And we've taken out 3 of the questions, and I'm going to launch a poll and ask you to answer them. So you can answer them as yourself, as you feel as a writer, if you were asked to do some writing and what your preferences are and how you feel about it. Or there might be a special student that you have in mind, maybe one who's a reluctant writer or who's had some challenges with writing that you wonder, what's that strategy or secret key that I could get to unlock and get them really connected and excited about writing? So whether it's yourself or a student, you can have someone in mind, and there's just 3 questions here to answer. And if you can weigh in, we'll leave the poll up for about a minute. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look at the results, and pretending as if that was our classroom of 25 or 30 students, look at what the results are and talk about how we could maybe use that information to help inform our instruction, our routines, our groupings, and some of the activities that we use to connect our kids with writing opportunities. So you should see that now up on your screen. And it's an anonymous poll. Again, you can weigh in as yourself or a student. And there's 3 questions, so it'll take about a minute here. Great, we're at about 25% of you have voted. If you have already voted, I'll just pose the question. How many of these questions do you know the answers to for how many of your students? So just thinking about knowing our students as little personalities, and maybe if they have some negative feelings or attitudes about writing and where those might come from, and how we might offer them some support, both emotionally as well as academically. Oh, you're amazing. We're at 81%. I'll leave it up for about another 10 seconds if we can get a few more people to answer. Wonderful. I'm going to close the poll there, and then I will share the results. Thank you so much. So if you know that this was your classroom, say 50% of your students preferred writing stories about their life, do your writing choices, when you give writing activities, do they have the opportunity to write about their life? Is there a nice balance and a blend between writing narrative stories, writing personal, or writing about nonfiction or informational or how-to things? So thinking about that, knowing how they find choosing words for writing. This is a pretty even split here, it looks like. And then what do you find challenging about writing? And maybe you don't find anything challenging, but probably everybody finds something. So coming up with ideas is a big one. I know my kids used to really struggle. And so we would come up with little books where they would brainstorm their own ideas. We had a class anchor chart of things they could write about to kind of move beyond that journal writing about what you did on the weekend or what we did at school this week, to give them some more voice and choice to build up that motivation and engagement. So thinking about how it could inform our writing and instructions, if you have any connections or insights or anything you want to share, please feel free to type it into the chat box and we will keep moving. So I'm going to stop sharing the poll. Get that out of the way. There we go. So starting at the earliest level of emergent writers, they really are starting to imitate what adult writers do and their early understandings of print, and that oral language can be written down and recorded. So a big part of that foundational piece is our modeled writing that we do, writing to children, and it's explicit teaching. So part of what we're wanting to explain to them is we're showing students again and again and again and again what to do, what good writers think and do, some of the decisions they have to make and mindsets. And it's not just about what we want to write, but how we're going to write it. And so that's tying back into what Jen showed earlier, those different forms and formats. So that doesn't always have to be a paragraph. It can look a bit lighter or a bit more interesting. It could be a poem or a joke or a brochure or a poster. And so they're still doing the thinking and the creation, but maybe it's less onerous than feeling like they always have to write a bunch of sentences. So another thing that we can do is model and demonstrate for our students how we can get ideas for stories and how we can practice storytelling. So we can do that orally with our students and do that oral rehearsal and sort out our ideas and our thoughts or our story elements orally with a partner or a group before we put the pencil to paper. And we can use what's happening in the classroom or the school or our neighborhood, just everyday things that happen, talk about it, and then draw it and show it to the students as an example of, it doesn't have to be a big fairy tale or an action adventure movie. We can write very simple and small stories that share really nice details of things happening in our class and in our world together. So here are a few examples. So we had show and tell today. Beth brought in her cat. So here's teacher modeling what that can look like. And part of that emergent writing is drawing pictures to convey what we're wanting to say. Here's another demonstration sample where there's drawings of something familiar from the playground, and then the teachers ask the students to share what they think the spelling is. And so you can see they've got some initial sounds there and some ending sounds to identify the tire swing, slide, swings, and a bridge. And then here's composing from an object. So sharing or showing an object and having students do some writing, a response to it, even a description, or if it evokes a certain feeling. So I made these beads in Mexico. I use them as napkin rings. They are colorful. And one last one here, composing from an object. So this is a student sample. So they made this model, they drew an illustration of their model, and then they did some writing, which is very adorable.
Okay, so another way that we can really work on that explicit instruction with our students is through interactive writing. So this is where we would work with our students, composing some writing together for an authentic purpose. And this is a great activity for our students to notice, where we can voice the writing process and how the written language works. And it's also a great transitional piece to our students working on independent practice. So it allows that in between modeling and independent practice. So some of the key features of interactive writing that I'll touch on today is what I mentioned about writing for an authentic purpose. This gives our students the motivation, like we already talked about earlier in the workshop. They need to care about what they're writing about. It needs to matter to them. So anytime that we can bring in those authentic purposes for writing, we have a better chance of engaging more of our students. Also, having a lot of conversation through the process allows for more accessibility to many of our students, depending on where they are developmentally, and talking that through, showing how reading and writing are connected, as well to oral language and speaking. So those are a lot of the key features that are positive benefits to our interactive writing. So one way that we can, one example in this case, that we can look at interactive writing is a how-to book. In this case, how to make a peanut butter sandwich. We can use anything that our students would have some familiarity with: how to tie shoes, how to do a somersault, how to make a sundae. So the idea is for them to be comfortable enough with the process that they can really get engaged in the steps. So in this case, you can see the different ways that we would engage our students through interactive writing, all the way from making a grocery list to rereading and adding in punctuation. So lots of different ways that we can show the writing process here with this kind of interactivity with our students and get them to be engaged in parts of it. So right now, what we're going to do is have you engage in one aspect of this. So I'm going to have you think about how to make a peanut butter sandwich, and think about the third step there. Decide which step is first, second, third, etc. And you're going to have a minute of our timed music to compose your steps in the chat box. And then again, you'll wait until the timer is up to press enter. And then we will see how similar our steps are and how different they are.
All right, so if you haven't yet, hit enter on your steps.
Oh, tons of interesting steps. Thank you so much for engaging in this. It's fun to see, how people thought about the different steps and considered all of the variety of ways that we make peanut butter sandwiches. There's so many different things that you could do with your students with this kind of activity. You could try testing it out, maybe not peanut butter because, allergies, but something like that. Test out, how to put on your jacket or something, and have fun with it. And you could even go to having students create how-to books of something that they're really good at and highlighting that for them. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples now of different how-to books. So here's How to Care for a Dragon. And the next one shows kind of the steps that you can use as a Blackline master. And there's one that I'll show you from a teacher who participated in a workshop for us a while ago. How to take a nice nap, not just a nap, a nice nap, how to enjoy it. I love that she says in step 2, to choose the location, a couch makes a novel location. And then she moves on to the next couple of steps. And my favorite here is last thing, yawn if you need to. Perfect.
And I always really like that there's 7 steps, and step 6 is actually just the one where you're sleeping. The rest is like all of the setup for getting ready to sleep.
Yeah.
How important it is setting the right conditions.
Absolutely. Yes. And excellent ideas in the chat box. I'm not going to read them all out, but make sure that you're checking them out, because wonderful, wonderful ideas in there about how to engage students in interactive writing.
Wonderful. So we do have a few Poppy created charts and resources that you can use as scaffolded supports for your early emergent writers. The wonderful thing is, because it's also interconnected, they also work well for early readers. So this can be a tool that you can have printed out, students can have in their desk. We've got our vowel charts, we've got alphabet charts, blends and digraphs, word families, and a simple vowel chart, and a short and long vowel chart. So all of these can help students if they're needing the supports in doing their writing. It can also help them with their reading when they're reading texts or reading their own writing as well, to help them strengthen up those skills and strategies for becoming stronger writers. So those are all available on our website if anybody's interested in printing them off. And looking now at early writers, so they've got a bigger understanding. They're starting to understand the variety of purposes for writing, that there are some different forms that we can use writing to convey messages, expressing ideas in simple sentences, and our spelling is inventive as we are approximating proper spelling. And that's developmentally, it's right on track with how they are learning to do this very complex task of writing. So in getting kids to do their own writing and writing by children, using mentor text is a really nice way for them to see a model and a demonstration of what good writing looks like and sounds like and how it reads. So whether that's for humor and enjoyment or mystery, suspense, all of those different elements, if we expose them to a wide variety of genres and authors and styles with really different voice, the author's voice being quite different, we can use those as co-teachers in the classroom and really highlight and explicitly draw their attention to the details of written language, different purposes, different styles of writing, as well as the difference between fiction and nonfiction, which is something we like to point out as well. Often read alouds can tend to be nonfiction, or sorry, read alouds often are fiction, and bringing in some nonfiction allows students to get that sense and understanding of different text features like table of contents and captions and diagrams and charts and an index at the back maybe. So it helps them with their reading, and then it's also another example of a different style of writing that they can do, which we're going to have Jen set up in a few minutes here. So right now we've got a lovely video of one of our favorite authors, Todd Parr, reading his The Don't Worry book. And what we'd like you to do here, the activity for you is just noticing. What do you notice about Todd Parr's writing? And feel free to type that, what you notice, into the chat as we're reading the book. So if we were together in a classroom, this would be an interactive read aloud, and we'd have some discussions about his work and his craft as a writer, and maybe pay attention to some of those traits and elements like voice and style and the illustrations and things like that. So here we go with Todd Parr, the Don't Worry book. Every time we see that, Jen and I say we just want to be his best friend. He's so relatable and approachable, and just like his books, like the color, everything that you're adding in the chat box, thank you so much. So the repetition, the humor, the bright colors, the simple messages, lots of examples, and they're specific, but they're general enough. So it's quite accessible for kids. And then there's not a lot of text. If I was still in the classroom, I would have my kids, they could write their own version of this type of book in the style of Todd Parr with the bright, colorful illustrations. Lots of ways you could go with this, but a really nice mentor text to highlight all of these wonderful things you're saying in the chat box.
Yes, thank you. We just so enjoy Todd Parr. So another way that we can really engage our students in explicitly showing the connection between reading and writing is through, in this case, learning new vocabulary. So we can look at a text and start to understand it through some writing, and then even continue to build that writing even further in the future. So in this case, we're going to take a look at learning new vocabulary through nonfiction, through engaging with nonfiction work. So we're going to do an interactive read aloud. And in this case, we're going to do a nonfiction book, listen to a nonfiction book about orcas. And what your job is to think about what words you might expect to see in a book about orcas. So we're activating some prior knowledge. We're starting to think about the vocab. For example, you might see aquatic mammal in a book about orcas. So I'm going to have you think about your predictions of what you might see for vocab and write those into the chat box before we start the read aloud. So that's kind of like, as I'm continuing to give you instructions here, you can start popping down some vocab into the chat box. Once we start the read aloud, what I'd like you to do is really notice when you hear the words that you predicted, or maybe even when you hear the words that someone else predicted in the chat box that you thought was really intriguing. And when you hear those words, you're going to use the reaction button in the Zoom toolbar to give me a thumbs up. You can do a reaction, or you can actually just show me a thumbs up if your video is on. And we'll see how many of the words that we came up with are in this read aloud. So we're going to or the interactive read aloud. So we're just going to play about the first minute of this book, just for time's sake, and we'll see what we come up with.
Yeah, there's a ton of really wonderful vocabulary words people are coming up with in the chat box.
Some of them I have never heard of. This is great. You guys know a lot more about orcas than I do.
There we go.
Okay, so thank you for engaging in that. So what we actually had you do was think about your prior knowledge already that you had, obviously tons. And then you were further engaged because you were waiting to see when your words were going to come up, and if your words were going to come up, then you were, giving me a signal of a thumbs up. So in a classroom, this works really well to engage our students. It also allowed you to think about what words that you didn't think of that came up that could allow you to consider, maybe you hadn't thought about habitat. And maybe when you take a look at a new book, you might consider that if you were looking at a new book about a different kind of animal. So what I would do here is engage my students further in some writing, so that they had the chance to either write about orcas, because they've already had that chance, or to write about a new animal that they go through the same process with. But now they're thinking about all of the information that they learned from this read aloud that they could then further put into their writing in the future when they're writing about animals or nonfiction writing. So I'll show you a couple of different examples of what that can look like, but just pointing out that you can have your students be thinking about adding description and adding comparisons to their writing, so that when their readers read the information, they start to make a picture in their head of what this nonfiction is all about. So some examples here of print examples. We'll go through these fairly quickly, so you can see. excellent examples of different things that you can do. Here's a great example of a fun movie poster that you can do with your students. And we'll switch to some ways that you can add in technology to work with your students. So it can be, more of a technology focused report in a couple of cases here.
Yeah, I think these are
apps.
trading cards. Yeah, so the link at the bottom left, this is bighugelabs.com. And so you can upload pictures, use your own pictures, or if you've done your own drawings, and you can use those to make things like this.
Excellent, thanks, Lisa. And magazine covers, lots of fun, with short snippets of prints that are highlights.
This was really, I was really proud of my writing here when I made this cover for appearance, when I wrote, "They're not really bulbs." I thought that was like a clever joke.
Yeah, nice. Good idea. And another great one. So you can also engage your students in script writing for a short video. So they are engaged in writing of a different kind then. They're engaged in writing to pre-plan some, like an oral presentation, a video, a podcast even. You could have some fun with this. Lisa and I say that she's going to rule the world someday. This is Charlotte. If you're familiar with LiveBits, this is her little sister. So if you're not, you can check out the links in our sources page. And oh my goodness, so cute. Okay, so I'm going to touch on the fact that we have talked about many different effective routines for writing instruction, all within like the last hour. So we looked at activating prior knowledge and using our language skills and thinking about the writing process and thinking about elements of writing and different varieties and genres. So tons of different things that we've explored in the last little bit with you. And this is such an important point. I just absolutely love this. Imagine if we didn't engage babies in conversations until they could correctly pronounce whole sentences. If we don't engage youngsters in the real work of writing until they can accurately write whole sentences, we risk slowing their learning. Such a wonderful analogy there. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind. And as a final reflection, start to think about what we did engage in with our different activities and resources that we shared today, all the way from 6-word stories at the beginning to looking at, our mentor texts with Todd Parr and Orca, and using those nonfiction read alouds to promote our writing. So I'll leave you with this this question: is how could this play out in your classroom? How could these activities work with your students in your situation, or how could they be adapted? So think about those as we move forward.
And if you're comfortable, I'll just jump in. If you want to share, if there's one activity or strategy, routine, or book that we shared that you would be most likely to try next week with your students, which one would it be? That's good feedback for us to know what you really connected with and what resonated for you.
Here's the sources. Thanks, Lisa. Here's the sources that we use to build this workshop. So if there's anything that you want to go back and check out, either the books in print, or the links, or the videos, please feel free to check out. Again, you can always contact us if you need any further information. And these are also, if you have your e-handout, then you have these available with the links for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And the writing interest survey is on our website. So if you go to poppy.ca, you can just search writing interest survey and you will find it. It's in our writing section as well. And there's an editable version if you wanted to tweak it a little bit or change up some of the wording. So it's a PDF and a Word document are both available. My goodness, Excellent. We're wrapping up a bit early, Jen. I can't believe this might be a first.
We were so worried about the amount of content we had with our video or with our workshop today. We went through it and timed it and everything, and we came out early. We never come out early. This is fantastic. But we will leave you with a lovely video that, since we are a little bit early, hopefully you can stick around for and check out. But before we get there, I just wanted to point out that this is our contact information for Lisa and I. And like, we're happy to connect with you in the future. Hopefully we'll even see you next week for our oral language workshop at the same time, same place. And yeah, just didn't really, I'll speak for her, Lisa and I, that we both really enjoyed this workshop, and it was fun interacting with you today. Learned so much.
Yeah, thank you for taking time after a busy day to join us. And we'll leave you with this lovely video, A Story About a Bird.